All right, so we're diving into Luke 10:38 to 42 today.
The story of Mary and Martha.
Yeah, you know the one.
Definitely familiar.
Especially for those of you preaching and leading Bible studies week after week. You've probably heard this one a few times.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But we've got some new perspectives here
Hopefully.
that'll have you seeing this
Even
story.
a new light.
Yeah, exactly.
Some fresh takes.
So we dug into sermons from pastors across the country.
All different denominations and backgrounds.
Yeah. What were some of the recurring themes?
Well, one of the big ones is pushing back against that traditional interpretation.
You know, the Mary's the good one, Martha's the bad one.
Right, exactly. That dichotomy.
Yeah.
A lot of pastors are highlighting Martha's hospitality.
Right.
Something that was actually really significant in that culture.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it was a sacred duty.
You're not just like, get out of here, I'm busy.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a huge honor to host people in your home.
So how are these pastors reframing Martha's actions?
Well, one pastor used the analogy of hosting like a high-profile celebrity,
Oh, okay.
like a Taylor Swift or somebody like that.
Yeah.
And you can imagine all the pressure, the expectations.
And get everything perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that kind of brings a new understanding to Martha's frantic energy.
Right. It's not just that she's like annoyed with her sister.
Right.
She's trying to,
Honor her guest.
yeah, exactly.
In best way she knows how.
Maybe she's going a little overboard.
Maybe so.
But her heart's in the right place.
Yeah, and this is where the concept of love languages comes in.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
One pastor pointed out that, Martha may have been expressing her love through acts of service,
Right.
while Mary was craving that quality time,
That makes sense.
that deep connection
Yeah.
with Jesus.
So it's not like,
Condemning one or praising the other.
yeah,
It's about recognizing that their actions were driven by different motivations.
in different ways of expressing love.
Except
I love that. Yeah. And it reminds us there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
to faith.
Yeah.
God meets us where we are.
Right. And this ties into another interesting theme.
The radical nature of Mary's choice.
To sit at Jesus' feet.
Yes.
Okay.
In that culture, women weren't typically allowed to be disciples,
Oh, that's right.
to learn alongside the men.
Yeah.
So Mary's actions were actually like a bold statement.
Wow.
It was defiance of those societal norms.
So it wasn't just about her wanting to learn.
No.
It was about
Challenging those expectations.
challenging those traditional roles.
It's
Yeah.
so interesting.
Yeah, it adds a whole other layer of depth to her choice.
It does.
And that's a powerful message that can resonate with us today.
Yeah.
As we grapple with these issues of gender roles and expectation.
Right. And it shows us this seemingly simple story.
It's actually about some pretty deep themes.
Yeah.
Gender roles, cultural expectations, even courage.
Yeah, that courage to follow your convictions.
Yes.
Even when they go against the grain. Absolutely.
Wow.
And it raises the question,
If-
what good portion are we missing out on?
When we get distracted by the urgent but not important things.
Exactly. And that brings us to the theme of distractions.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me.
Sure.
Because I am constantly bombarded.
But by distractions.
Yes, emails, social media, the news.
It's overwhelming.
So how did these pastors connect this ancient story to our modern hyper-connected lives?
Well, several of them brought up the Greek word Parispao,
Okay.
which is actually used in this passage. And it means to be dragged around or overwhelmed.
Parispao.
Parispao.
That's a powerful word.
It is.
So is that like when you realize you've spent the last hour on social media?
Scrolling mindlessly.
Yeah, and haven't actually accomplished anything.
Exactly.
I know that feeling well.
It's that feeling of being constantly reactive rather than proactive.
Wow.
And I think that resonates with a lot of people today,
Yeah, definitely.
whether they realize it or not.
So how do we break free from that?
That cycle of Parispao.
Yeah, how do we carve out space for those merry moments?
Yes, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And there's no easy answer.
Right.
But these pastors offered some practical advice and some really engaging sermon illustrations.
Okay, let's dive into those illustrations.
Right.
I'm always looking for fresh ideas to bring these stories to life.
Sure.
What were some of the most memorable ones you came across?
Well, one pastor used this analogy of a jar
Okay.
filled with rocks and pebbles and sand.
Okay.
And he explained, the big rocks.
Yeah.
Those are the most important things in our lives.
Our relationship with God, our family.
Exactly,
Yeah,
our
okay.
core values.
Got it.
Then there's the smaller pebbles.
The things that are important.
Yeah, but not essential.
Okay. Like our jobs, our hobbies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Social commitments.
All right.
And then finally, you've got the sand.
The little distractions.
All the little things that can easily consume our days
Yeah.
if we let them.
Oh, I like that.
So he challenged his congregation
Yeah.
to think about what they were filling their jars with.
Oh, that's good.
You know, are we prioritizing the big rocks?
the things that matter most,
Exactly.
or are we letting the sand and the pebbles take over?
And leaving no room for what's truly important.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way to frame it.
And it leads us back to Mary.
Yeah.
You know, she chose to sit at Jesus' feet
To make that the big rock.
to make that relationship the priority.
Even if it meant, maybe disappointing her sister or defying those social norms.
Exactly. And speaking of those social norms,
Okay.
another pastor used a really interesting analogy.
What's that?
He compared Mary's choice to sit at Jesus' feet
Yeah.
to Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on the bus.
Wow.
He said both women were challenging the status quo,
Yeah.
defying expectations.
Standing up for what they believe in,
Exactly.
even when it was unpopular.
Even when it could cost them something.
Wow, that is a powerful connection.
It is.
Because it makes it seem like Mary is,
not just passively sitting there.
right?
She's making a statement.
Yeah.
She's being defiant.
Yeah, she's being courageous.
Absolutely.
And I love that message because it resonates with people today.
Right.
Especially those who are navigating complex social and cultural landscapes.
Yeah. It's a reminder that following Jesus
Often requires us to step outside our comfort zones.
and challenge those assumptions.
Right.
Be willing to stand out.
Yeah, to be countercultural even.
Absolutely.
So it's not always about those grand gestures or the public pronouncements.
Sometimes the most profound acts of faith.
Happen in those quiet moments.
In the seemingly insignificant moments.
Yeah, like Mary just sitting at Jesus' feet listening.
Just soaking it all in.
That reminds me of another illustration a pastor used.
Oh, tell me about it.
He talked about huckleberries on a hiking trail.
Okay.
He said, we're so focused on reaching the destination.
When getting to the end of the trail.
Yeah, and checking off our to-do list.
Right.
That we miss the little blessings along the way.
The beauty all around us.
Yeah.
The little huckleberries.
Yeah, those opportunities for joy and connection that are right there in front of us.
But we're too busy looking ahead
Oh, that is so true.
to notice them.
I've been guilty of that myself.
I think we all have.
We're so caught up in the doing.
That we forget to just be,
Yeah, just be present and soak in the moment.
to appreciate those gifts that God has given us.
And that's where those Parispao moments come in.
When we're so distracted
By the noise and the busyness.
that we miss those quiet whispers of God's grace. Those gentle nudges of His Spirit.
So how do we cultivate that?
That more Mary-like approach.
Yeah, how do we create space for those huckleberry moments?
In the midst of all the chaos.
Yeah.
Well, one pastor used a really interesting analogy.
Okay,
He
yeah.
talked about being a chauffeur.
A chauffeur.
Yeah.
Okay.
He said we're all like chauffeurs.
We're skilled at navigating the roads of life.
Yeah. We know how to get things done.
But ultimately,
We need to take direction
from someone else.
from the person in the back seat. From Jesus.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that.
It's a reminder that we're not in control.
Right.
We need to surrender to His guidance,
To trust in His plan.
even when it doesn't make sense to us.
That's a beautiful image.
And it connects back to that idea of the GPS
Yeah.
that we talked about earlier.
If we're constantly distracted by all the noise.
Our spiritual GPS gets jammed.
Right.
We end up going in circles,
Yeah.
feeling lost and frustrated.
But when we prioritize that connection with Jesus.
It's like the signal gets stronger,
Yeah, clear.
and we can navigate those twists and turns.
With more confidence and peace.
Exact.
Speaking of navigating life's twists and turns,
Yeah.
one pastor used an illustration that I think is really relevant for us.
Especially for pastors and church leaders.
Yeah.
He talked about the importance of creating a culture of grace and permission.
In our churches.
Yes, just like Jesus didn't condemn Martha for her busyness.
Right.
We shouldn't make people feel guilty for needing to take a break.
Or for saying no to extra commitments. Or for prioritizing their mental and spiritual health.
That's so important,
It is.
Because it's easy to get caught up in that go, go, go mentality.
The tyranny of the urgent.
Yeah, but we need to remember that we're not machines.
We need rest.
Rejuvenation.
And we need to model that for the people we lead.
Yeah, that might mean reevaluating how we measure success.
in ministry.
Yeah, it's not about how many programs we run or events we host,
It's about creating a space,
where people can encounter Jesus,
experience his love,
grow in their faith,
and fostering that culture where Mary's choice
to sit at his feet,
is not seen as lazy or unproductive,
but as vital.
as an act of discipleship.
That's such a good point, especially in today's world.
Where burnout is so prevalent.
Yeah, even in ministry.
Yeah,
We need to remind ourselves and the people we lead
that it's okay to take a break.
to step back,
Yeah,
to recharge,
to prioritize that connection with Jesus.
above all else.
Then it's interesting how this passage also speaks to how we approach discipleship. Oh, yeah, how so?
Well, one pastor made the point that Mary, sitting at Jesus' feet,
Yeah.
it wasn't just about her personal growth.
It was about modeling a different way of being a disciple.
Right, she wasn't outperforming miracles.
Or preaching to the masses.
She was just present.
Absorbing Jesus' teaching.
Yeah, and just allowing herself to be transformed.
By his presence.
But she was embodying that verse from Psalm 46.10.
Be still and know that I am God.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful ministry
Is just being a conduit
of God's peace.
and presence.
Yeah, just being that vessel.
And that can be a challenge.
For those of us who are wired for action,
Oh, yeah.
who like to get things done.
Yeah.
But even Jesus himself,
Took time to retreat,
from the crowds,
to pray.
to recharge
He understood that importance of balance.
between action and contemplation
Yeah. That's a great reminder.
for all of us.
Whether we're leading a church or just trying to live out our faith.
It's not about becoming a Mary clone and abandoning all responsibility.
Yeah.
It's about finding that rhythm of grace
That balance.
between serving others and nurturing our own souls.
And speaking of serving others, one pastor used an illustration.
I liked this one.
What was it?
He talked about how in our efforts to serve,
Yeah.
we can sometimes end up serving Jesus right out of the room.
What does that mean?
Well, we get so focused on the tasks,
The to-do lists.
yeah, that we forget to cultivate that personal connection with him.
That sense of intimacy and dependence.
Exactly.
You get that?
We can get so busy doing things for Jesus
Yeah.
that we forget about actually being with Jesus.
That's a sobering thought.
It is.
Said we're so busy setting the table.
That we forget to invite the guest of honor to dinner.
Wow. Yeah, and that can lead to a sense of emptiness.
Burnout.
Yeah. Wondering why our efforts just feel so unfulfilling.
We might be doing all the right things.
But if our hearts aren't aligned,
Yeah.
we
Yeah, or
just-
if we're not drawing our strength and inspiration from him, then it just becomes another item on the to-do list.
rather than an overflow of our love for him.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Luke 10:38 to 42,
What's the key takeaway?
what would you say for those pastors and Bible study leaders
Who are looking for those fresh insights?
to share with their congregations
I think it comes down to this. We need to rediscover the beauty and the power.
of simply being with Jesus?
It's not about choosing between Mary or Martha or
Right.
action versus contemplation.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that both are essential.
For a healthy, vibrant faith,
Yeah. Finding that sweet spot
where our service flows out of our love for him.
where our busyness is tempered by his peace.
Yeah, and where we allow ourselves to be filled
By his presence.
before we rush out to fill the needs of others.
That's good.
It's a good reminder that the good portion that Mary chose.
It's not just about knowledge or checking things off a list.
Yeah.
It's about that deep, abiding connection
With Jesus.
that sustains us, transforms us,
And empowers us.
to live out our faith in a way that's both meaningful and life-giving.
So beautifully said. It reminds us that that message is just as relevant today as it was back then.
Absolutely.
So as you prepare to teach or preach on this passage,
Dig a little deeper.
explore the nuances.
Find those fresh perspectives
That'll help your congregation encounter this familiar story.
in a whole new light.
Great advice. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.